Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro. Today is October 17th, 2019, and I'm here at FasterConf to unveil to you my 3-box mentorship model. So I devised this mentorship model, and I've used it with a lot of bootcamp grads to help them fast track from bootcamp grad to senior dev in the shortest amount of time. I also like to call this model the shampoo mentorship model, which will make sense here shortly. And I want to tell you that this talk is not about how to pass your interview to get a job in the web dev industry. What this talk is really about is closing the gap between bootcamp grad and getting the job. So what is the gap? The gap is having the skills to hit the floor running on day one of a job. All right. So the idea is that no one will question you whether you are junior material and beyond. Okay. And the idea also here is that the mentorship model will create an actual path from grad to senior. So the idea is to take 9 years and turn it into 9 months. Okay. So you don't have to wait as long as I did to become a senior developer. Now, I called this the shampoo model because we have these 3 boxes and they perfectly fit into wash, rinse, and repeat, okay? So in the first box here, the idea is we give a bootcamp grad an assignment or a project, and the idea is we want them to wash out. We want them to fail on their own because we want to be able to assess them and see if they actually need mentorship, all right? In the second box here, we have rinse. And the idea here is to clean up their skills and processes. So the idea is to get them to produce the end result to become a junior developer. And the last box here is to repeat. Keep doing the same stuff because doing it once is not enough. And the idea is to achieve senior level, all right? So this is the 3-box model. And to really understand it, we have to ask ourselves one question. How long should it take to build a routine app with a few hard bits? And I know the answer to this question because I've ran so many bootcamp grads through my mentorship model here. I can tell you that it usually takes 30 plus hours. So I give a project and I say, here's the project. You got a week and go ahead and do it. And they come back to me a week later and they put a lot of time in and it's not even done. Okay. So that is the reality of it. That is the gap. And that's why grads are not getting hired. So what I do is I put them through my model here and I give them a bit of supervision. And the idea is I get them down to 9 hours, okay, on the same project. And now they are worth hiring. All right. And then we go beyond that. And the idea is to help them try to get to my level. So I'm able to build this app here in 3 hours or less. And the idea is to get them as close as possible to my time that's capable for themselves. Okay. So now that we have an idea what the model looks like, I just want to prime your mind to think like a senior developer just before we get into the details here, okay? So one thing I always ask bootcamp grads is I say, what do you think a senior developer, what does it take to become a senior developer? And they'll generally just talk about technical skills, okay? But I want to tell you that that is only 10% of the job, and we have all this other stuff that you have to be doing alongside this technical stuff, and that's what we are focusing on in this mentorship model, improving your technical skills whilst doing all these other things, okay? Because that's what companies want, all right? So going into the first box, and we're going to walk through each box here to understand how I actually deliver this mentorship model, okay? So for box alpha or the wash stage, the goal is to get a benchmark of the student's overall skill and aptitude and gauge their commitment to the mentorship program, okay? So the student is unsupervised, meaning we aren't going to help them whatsoever. It's important to see what they come back with on their own so that we can have a fair and unbiased assessment, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to provide them a high-level outline of our project, and we're going to narrow down the major technical choices and throw in some wrenches, okay? And if you're wondering what a wrench is a technical implementation you know that will be difficult or not routine programming where they'll have to do some digging, okay? So they're not going to be able to look up tutorials too often on these things. And what's really important here is you want to be vague with your details, okay? You don't want to give them too much instructional information at this stage of mentorship. But I said earlier, you need to choose your major technical choices. So for majors, it could be like Rails, Mithril, and AWS. And for wrenches, you could do something like generate PDF thumbnails. That seems to be a very hard thing for graduates to figure out. And then we want to give them a scope. So they need to put as many hours as they want to put in it, but they need to come back to me a week later on a hard deadline with whatever they have done, okay? And usually I'll tell them it has to be done, but they always come back with something that's incomplete. And the last thing I want you to do is I would say throw in some additional tasks as bonus points. And the reason we do this is we want to see if they'll get distracted by fun tasks, okay? To really understand whether they focus on the scope of the project and deliverable, or they're just having a good time, okay? So there are some conditions here that we need to set up for each box, okay, so that we set clear expectations. And so the first thing we're going to tell them is they have to give us a few updates on their progress throughout the week. And after their set time is up, it's their responsibility to schedule a time to follow up. I'm not going to reach out to them. It's their responsibility, okay? And if they fail to do so for either of these things, then it's time to end mentorship, okay? If the student is lacking the various fundamental web framework and programming knowledge, even if they did their best effort, if they're way too far gone, then it's time to end mentorship, okay? Because we don't want to waste each other's times. There has to be the right fit for this. So the common problems I find at this stage is that you get ghosting, excuses, or they just can't cut it, okay? So the reason for ghosting is usually they're embarrassed because they didn't meet the expectations or the commitment. Sometimes you get excuses, so they'll say they're just blaming others or etc. But the point is that you are giving them time, you're giving them opportunity, and they either meet it or they don't, okay? And the last one is they just can't cut it, all right? So this is just when they don't have the fundamental skills or other attributes that are ideal for web development, all right? So that is box A. And just before we move on here, I just want to show you an example of a project outline. So generally what I'll do is I have a few different projects, but one I like to give out is Career Karma. And so this is a web application where I have them build a platform where developers can upload their resumes and companies can post opportunities, okay? And you can see here, I have some details here. So I will generally have technical requirements. So I'll describe like exactly how authentication has to be, and I'll put in use case requirements so they understand the business objectives of this project, okay? And then once they come back to me after a week, I'll give them an overall assessment. So I have this nice big Word doc, which is full of, I believe, 30 questions or things to assess them on. And then I mark it out of 6 different categories: documentation, accountability, problem solving, time management, scoping, and technical skills, okay? And I also ask them how many hours they put in and record that as well, because we're going to use this assessment later on to see if they are ticking all these boxes. And this is really to help them think like a senior dev, okay? So remember the big list of questions we had earlier? This is kind of the same thing there, all right? So now that we're done with the alpha box, and if they've made it onto the beta box or the rinse stage, we'll talk about what the goal is here. So the goal here is to meet the minimum expectations of a junior developer. So what I will do is I'll have them do the exact same project they just spent a week on, which they weren't able to complete on their own, okay? And so in this stage, it's supervised. So in the last one, we didn't help them whatsoever. We just gave them the stuff and said, come back to us. And this one, we're going to give them a little bit more help. And so the idea here is we want to ensure the student works through the problem on their own still, but supervised means we mentor them, so we ensure they stay focused, okay? It doesn't mean we're pair programming with them. It does not mean they're going to watch us implement the solution so they understand it. Because if you do that, it's just like them watching tutorial. They are not learning. They have to figure it on their own. They have to get through the obstacle on their own. That is the point of mentorship at this stage, all right? And so now that we know the goal of this box, let's talk about what is going to happen in the stage. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide them a high-level outline again, just like the last one, but this time around, we're going to read it out to them so they understand the scope, and then we're going to have them rewrite it in their own words to test their communication skills, okay? Because repetition leads to clear communication, all right? And don't worry about being perceived as annoying. This is something that people really need to understand about clear communication, is that people are annoyed when you repeat things because they think you don't know, but really clear communicators always repeat because they just want to really make sure that they 100% understand, okay? You wouldn't believe how often I'll be talking to someone and as soon as I just repeat it in a different way, I shake loose misunderstandings, or if when I write stuff down, we find other misunderstandings, okay? So I have those 3 stars there if you want to read about that later, okay? On to the next thing, we want them to create an estimate. So the idea is I'm going to say, hey, we got this project. So how many hours do you think it would take to do? And they'll give you an hours like 60 hours or like 80 hours, whatever it is. And then the idea is you say, okay, well, here are all the tasks. Now estimate the time you think it would take. And then we'll get a totally different time. So here we have 35. This is a real example, by the way. And then what I'll do as the mentor is I will then adjust their time saying, no, really, it should take you this long as a junior developer, okay? And then what they'll do is they will track their own time against that and see how close it is. And you can see this person was very close to the adjusted time. And then I also have my time to show them like what is the end goal, like the senior level goal that we need them to get to. All right. So they have some clear actionable path to get to, right? And so the next thing is we really want to guarantee they have good focus, and we can get great focus through strict processes, all right, by making sure they're just not doing whatever they want to do. So the idea is when you set up this project, you're going to have them only submit work through pull requests. They're not allowed to push to master. We're going to reject any commits which are not linked to issues. So down below, you can see Ashwin here, and he has commits, and you can see the #8. So everything is linked, okay? Tasks must be done in the order. So the idea is they're not allowed to just pick from a pool of tasks. They have to do exactly everything in order. They have to wait for you, okay, and there's no skipping ahead, all right? They need to keep a Kanban board up to date so that we have visibility on how they're progressing. If they were to get stuck, they need to show proof of exhausting all options before asking for assistance. And when they get stuck, they must also make sure they don't go over hours, okay? So if you've allocated 2 hours for a task and they're 1.5 hours in, then maybe that's the point where they should be asking or then posting a question online so that they're not going over those 2 hours, okay? So being smart about your time. And then on to the fourth part of here, we as the mentor, we need to prep all the tasks up front for them. These tasks need to be detailed with subtasks. So there you can see I have a task where I'm talking about implementing a device for authentication, and I'm giving them the steps, okay? So it's not super granular. I'm not showing them everything, but I'm definitely giving them clear instructions on how to implement it, okay? And then I also like to organize my tasks into milestones and give them really cool titles so they feel that they're progressing. All right. So I really like Star Trek. So these are the Star Trek ranks. And when you're working with me, you're working to become a 5-star admiral. Okay. And then the last thing here is documentation. Documentation is super, super important. And the frequency and the availability of that documentation is also important. Okay. So here I have an example from a student. And here they are installing Postgres and they're setting up Django, okay? So that's them creating all the steps. And the idea is that if I come in here, I should be able to exactly replicate all the steps that you have done, and it should be close to the time that you have done it. And if you are working on your stuff, you should always push your code end of day. You should never be holding onto code, okay? Even if it's incomplete. All right. So that is basically how the Box beta works. Okay. But what are the conditions around here? What are the expectations? So if the student shows reluctance to build the same project again, then it's time to end mentorships. Because this is one thing that people do not understand is that you need to repeat. And if they're complaining now, they're not going to like what's coming. Okay. Because we're going to be doing a lot of repetition here. All right. The other thing is that we're going to ask them how many hours they will commit per week. And if their commitment is too low or they do not meet the hours for any reason, then it's time to end mentorship because we need to also keep pace. So if we estimate out that this project will take 10 hours, we might ask them to do it in a week or might ask them to do it in 2 weeks, but anything beyond that is just not acceptable. So what are the reasons why students might not be interested at this point in mentorship? It's because they don't want to do the same project again. They are not willing to put in the time, or they have serious problems focusing or thinking creatively, okay? So those are the things you need to watch out for. So now we're on to the last box here, and this is getting to the senior level. Because in the last one we've achieved junior, right? We've made it to that time frame of whatever we determined was the most acceptable time. Okay, and so this one is just reiterating. So we're focusing on improving the execution time, and we're going to add various complexity on the same project or consecutive similar projects. And so the student is starting from scratch every single time. Okay, so that's how I got really good, and I believe that is generally the way that everyone gets good. Is that if you are working 9 years in the industry, you get better every single time you start a new project. But if I force you to do it more frequently, you're just accelerating that time. Okay, so the student is going to be timed, and we have two different different ways of timing them. We have sprints and marathons, and between projects, they have to do homework, okay? Because the idea is that we want them to continuously beat their previous time by learning ways of working faster, okay? And so we have muscle memory, variation, automation. We're going to get all into that right now, and you can leave me alone, Creative Cloud, okay? And so let's talk about the timed events. So for timed events, what I want you to think about, I want you to think about living every day like a hackathon, okay? Because that really is how this is going to work. So the idea is you want to track your time and you want to set and break records. All right. And so we have sprints and we have marathons. So the idea is that for sprints, you want to treat every task as a hard deadline or as if it's 3 days late. Okay. Because that's going to give you the mentality of the speed at which you need to work at. And you want to think about the project like being in a marathon. So treat every project like 24 hours to 48 hours hackathon. So at this stage, you really want your student to be doing things in the scope of 1 or 2 days on a single project. Okay. So in the last box that they could get a week or two, but here it's just, this is the pace we're moving at, okay? And now on to actually how do we work faster, okay? And so the first we're going to talk about is muscle memory. I'm going to tell you this is the number one thing you can do to improve your speed, okay? Practicing proper form. It just seems to be a thing that is highly neglected in our industry. But like I always like to call it like chopping wood or practicing your scales. And the reason why this is important is that I've helped so many bootcamp grads, but they're so busy watching their hands, they cannot concentrate on the work in front of them, okay? So once you have that muscle memory, then you don't have to think about what your hands are doing. You can really focus on what's in front of you, all right? So just some muscle memory tricks to help you get up to speed. One thing you could do is you could try out Dvorak, which is a alternate keyboard layout. I know that sounds really extreme, but it's definitely something that helps you think about how to work faster. You could focus on not making typing mistakes. So I might suggest here to go slow enough that you don't make typing mistakes and then increase your speed, okay? Because that's a lot of things I see where I see a lot of bootcamp grads and they're just typing and they're making so many mistakes that they have to undo so much, okay? Learning Vim is a great way of increasing your speed so you can code faster. Doing projects in different editors, so try IntelliJ, try Atom, try Vim and VS Code and do an entire project in them, okay? How about take the mouse away? Take the mouse away so that they can focus just on their keyboard skills. Improve your regex skills because a lot of editors use regex so you can mass edit stuff. Doing hotkey drills is very important. Learning Unix commands because that's going to allow you to do a lot more fine-tuned manipulation with your code. And just using simpler tools because if you use like let's say you're using like a Git visualizer such as Git Kraken or I think the other one's called Source Tree. A lot of them do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to learn any Git commands. But if you choose GitX, you do get a little bit of proficiency. But the idea is you still need to know the fundamental stuff. You don't forget that fundamental knowledge. Okay, so that is the muscle memory stage. Then we have variation. Okay, so I'm a big believer that you should always do things at least 3 times every single time, and with variation. Okay. And so the question I'm going to pose to you is, what are you going to do when you don't get to choose the word's missing there, but when you don't get to choose the tools and tech, okay? And that's why variation is so important. Because if you want to be a React developer, if you want to guarantee they're going to be a React developer, you need to do it every which way because every company does it differently. So for this kind of homework, the idea is that you'd say, okay, I want to use Webpack, I want to use Webpacker, I want to use it without Webpack, and now I want to use with Grunt. Okay, so we just have a lot of variations here. All right. And then we have automation. So once you've tapped out muscle memory and variation, automation comes last. And it allows you to go even faster than you can ever imagined, okay? But you really want to do this once you've built your base skills. And so this is when you're creating generators and scaffolders, you're creating skeleton apps to start to bootstrap a project. You're creating modular components, engines, packages, and libraries. Maybe you're using a headless CMS. You are writing provisioning scripts using Chef, Capistrano, CloudFormation, or Terraform, or you're writing playbooks and developer handbooks. So when you, if you can't remember how you did it, at least you have a go-to guide to do that, okay? And the idea here is that by automating stuff, you're actually freeing yourself up to do even more complex stuff. So you're able to layer in test code and DevOps and all that kind of stuff, okay? So what are the conditions with Box Gamma? So Box Gamma, the student is expected to do their homework by practicing and preparing for consecutive attempts at projects. If a student is failing to be consistent or is falling into old habits, then it's time to end mentorship, okay? So common problems we see here, and very few people make it to the stage. But some people are happy because, they're junior now, and so they got their goal, and they're going to take the 9 years or 8 years to become senior, whatever it is. But they are satisfied with their progress, okay? Or they just cannot shake their personal preferences in order to progress to the next level. Some people just really they're like, I really love Adam. I'm not going to use anything else, okay? But the idea is to get you constantly out of your comfort zone so you are not plateauing, okay? Or they just don't have the endurance to stick with it, okay? So, and maybe they're just more suited for a slower path, all right? So those are the common problems at this stage. Okay, and so we've gone through the entire 3-box mentorship model. And if you want to use this mentorship model, I'm actually open sourcing it. Okay, so it's not out just yet. So if you do want early preview, I do have all these documents and resources within a kit here. So if you email me, I'll send it over to you. And I'm just working on a website here and a distribution model for this. Okay, and it's open source, so it's definitely going to be free. And I definitely want other people to mentor developers. Or if you are a bootcamp grad, if you can just find somebody that is one step ahead of you to just go, just act as your mentor. Or if you want to, if you have the real diligence yourself, apply this mentorship model as if you are the mentor to yourself, okay? Because it's totally possible, all right? And so now that we're all done there, I just want to point out that if you are trying to upskill and get a job in the web dev industry, getting AWS certifications is something that is of high value, okay? And if you want to get started on that track, I have a free course for the Certified Cloud Practitioner, which has over 85 plus videos. So you can go to thefreeccp.com for that. I also want to point out that I'm doing a podcast with Skill Pathway again, and this is about the Learning Developers podcast. And so this is really a story about paying it forward. So I used to have a student of mine who was trying to get into a boot camp, and he wasn't meeting the minimum requirements. Okay, I met him online, and so I'm very helpful. I like to help a lot of people online, and so I helped him close that gap so that he'd actually get into the boot camp itself. And I forgot about Tom, and then 3 years later, it turns out that he became a CTO, and then he was done with that company, and then he became a junior principal for $1 billion company. So I get to talk to him, and he gets to share with us his journey from being a bootcamp grad to working for $1 billion company. And I definitely think you need to tune in for that. When this is coming out, I'm not sure, maybe in a week or two. So do look out for that, okay? And we can now move on to questions.